for starting your week with us. Hello and welcome to Business Daily. I'm Lee in Seoul. Let's get started with a glimpse of today's highlights. Union members of Korea's largest automaker, Hyundai Motor, stage a full nationwide strike for the first time in 12 years, threatening the company's profits and sales. With global economic growth expected to flounder this year and next, Korea's growth projections are not so bright either, especially with the government's ongoing restructuring drive. These stories and more coming right up. Hyundai Motor's labor union has launched a full strike on this Monday after rejecting an earlier compromise on a wage increase. And while the two sides are expected to meet again this week for another round of negotiations, the strike is still expected to deal a blow to the auto giant and its subcontractors. Our Kim Min-ji starts us off.
Unionized workers at Hyundai Motor have walked off the job after rebuffing a compromise on a wage hike. Assembly lines at the automaker's factories in Ulsan, Jeonju and Asan were all halted early Monday morning. The full strike, the first of its kind in 12 years, is seen as a move to pressure the company to put forward a new wage proposal. Monday's full strike alone is expected to cost Hyundai some $145 million or loss in production of 7,200 cars. The union has held partial strikes 19 times during the months-long negotiations, resulting in production loss of 100,000 cars or roughly $2 billion. For the rest of the week, the union plans to stage partial strikes of 6 hours, with the exception of days when there are negotiations, when they will walk out for 4 hours. The two sides reached a tentative agreement last month to raise workers' monthly wages by about $50 and give a bonus of 350% of their monthly pay and a separate cash bonus of roughly $3,000. The company also scrapped a plan to introduce a wage peak system where wages fall at a certain age in exchange for longer time on the job, which had been one of the most contentious issues. The proposal was rejected by unionists, with nearly 80% voting it down. Management says the union has gone back on its word by turning down the earlier agreement, saying it will take a toll not only on Hyundai but its subcontractors and the local economy. The union and management are planning to meet again this week in an attempt to reach another tentative deal. Kim Min-ji, Business Daily.
The Supreme Prosecutor's Office has requested an arrest warrant for Lotte Group Chairman Shin Dong-bin for embezzlement and breach of trust charges amounting to roughly $154 million. Many had expected prosecutors to continue the investigation into Shin without detaining him, but officials reportedly made a decision based on the gravity of the charges against him and in consideration of possible future probes into other Korean conglomerates. The 61-year-old allegedly presided over questionable mergers and acquisitions, selling the assets at below market prices. He's also accused of amassing over $26 million in slush funds siphoned off of the group's construction arm over the past decade. Meanwhile, prosecutors said they plan on charging Lotte's founder Shin Gyuk-ho and the chair's older brother Dong-ju without holding them in custody. The global growth rate is expected to dip below 3% this year and into next if recent projections hold. And Korea is no exception, with the ongoing corporate restructuring drive taking a toll on the local economy. Our Kim Jung-soo has more.
Major economic and financial institutions have recently downgraded their latest forecasts to project the global economy will grow in the 2% range this year. The projections also say Korea's growth rate will drop to near 1% for the last quarter of 2016 and the first 2 quarters of 2017. In a report out last week, the OECD said that global growth is expected to slow at a much more rapid rate than anticipated, as the world has entered a low-growth trap. It lowered its global growth projection for 2016 to 2.9% last Wednesday, from 3% back in June. This is also 0.2 percentage points lower than the annual growth in 2015, which was at a low after the global financial crisis. At the height of the crisis in 2009, the global growth rate dipped below zero. It jumped up to over 5% in 2010 and then dropped into the 4% range in 2011 and continued to fall through 2015. The OECD also revised its forecast for next year from 3.3% to 3.2%. The International Monetary Fund has also made similar projections, with Managing Director Christine Lagarde saying earlier this month that, quote, forceful policy actions must be devised or the world could suffer from disappointing growth for a long time. For Korea, major investment banks such as HSBC have projected that the country's growth rate in the fourth quarter of this year will remain unchanged at 1.6% from the same period last year. HSBC predicts the growth rate for the first and second quarters of next year will hover at 1.8%. JP Morgan has cited numerous reasons for its own negative projections for Korea, saying that the government's corporate restructuring drive and tighter regulations on mortgage loans could stifle the country's growth in 2017. Kim Jung-soo, Business Daily.
And there are concerns about borrowing, this time by small business owners. Data from the Bank of Korea shows that borrowing by owner-operators jumped by more than $21 billion over a period of 1 year as of the end of August. That brought the total balance to nearly $229 billion. Now, small business debt is particularly concerning because, in reality, it's often used to support living costs and is at higher risk of default. While in the past, owner-operators had funded most of their venture with retirement and savings, loans now account for an average of 32% of the expenses, which is up 7 percentage points over 6 years. Saudi Arabia says it may be willing to cap its production down at January levels ahead of an informal OPEC meeting set to be held on Wednesday in Algiers. This is according to Bloomberg, which quoted Algeria's Energy Minister Noureddin Bouteflika on Sunday. The minister said this could be, quote, an interesting step, which could potentially lead to a concrete decision by the group in the future. But the offer comes with a caveat, with Riyadh saying it's contingent on rival Iran's agreement to freeze its production at current levels. If Tehran accepts the offer, the world's biggest oil exporter says it will cut its production levels to 10.2 million barrels a day, compared to a record 10.69 million in August. The International Energy Agency projects the oil surplus will last longer than expected through the end of next year. Global financial markets seem to have stabilized after the U.S. Fed Reserve decided to keep its benchmark interest rate at its September meeting. And we're now joined by our Business Daily's markets contributor Choi Jin-seok to talk about what to expect from the markets this week. Hello, Jin-seok.
Great to be here.
All right, so Asian markets opened mostly down today ahead of the talks among major global oil producers. With that, how did the Korean stock market close on the first day of this week?
All right, the Korean equity market struggled to continue its strong performance on the first session of the week. The Kospi index opened with a slight downtick that reversed into positive territory in the early hours. But the market soon gave up early gains to close at 2047.11, down 0.34% compared to the previous session. The massive sell-off by institutional investors dragged down the index. The Kosdaq didn't move much, closing at 686.76, down 0.27% from Friday.
So for the week ahead, what are some of the events that are worth keeping our eyes on from both at home and abroad?
Right. This week on the calendar, although global financial markets were relieved by the FOMC, investors still want to see what Fed Chair Janet Yellen will say about future policy directions during her testimony before the House Committee on Financial Services on Wednesday, local time. She's set to deliver a prepared statement. Then the committee will ask questions that are not disclosed beforehand, so they can lead to heavy market volatility. Before that, the first presidential debate held on Monday will be another important market event from the U.S., since political uncertainty can always hurt market sentiment. Also, a major meeting of interest will be the 5th International Energy Forum taking place in Algeria from Monday to Wednesday. And of course, the informal gatherings among OPEC producers will be one of the biggest highlights.
And by 5th, you meant 15th, right?
15th,
okay,
right.
All right. Now, as you said, the first U.S. presidential debate on Monday between Democrat nominee Hillary Clinton and Republican nominee Donald Trump will likely be one of the mostly closely watched political debates to date. So what kind of impact can we expect from that?
Right. First of all, the U.S. stock market may react to a perceived shift in momentum. In a recent survey, Clinton leads Trump by 48% to 41%. But if any outcome from the debate creates a shift in momentum for either candidate, market volatility can go up. The fact that the U.S. market has recently shown the lowest volatility this year raises more concerns. In other words, it could be the calm before the storm. One of the things we have to take a close look at is the FX market. Both candidates have been advocating trade protectionism for their exporters. So a lot of emphasis on the issue during the debate could possibly drive the dollar down and the Korean won up.
Now, what should we expect from the IEA and informal OPEC meeting this week? I mean, we just heard the report on Saudi Arabia, and we also saw a rebound in global oil prices.
Right. During the International Energy Forum, senior energy officials from consuming and producing countries of the IEA and OPEC will hold informal talks with many producers desperate for an agreement to cut overall production to raise prices. Despite hopes for a deal, there are still mixed signals, according to market experts and government officials. Germany's Commerzbank expects this week's meeting will end without any concrete results. A source familiar with Saudi oil officials said the country regards the talks as consultations rather than decision-making meetings as well. The lower expectations were quickly reflected in oil prices on Friday. November WTI crude dropped by about 4%, marking the sharpest decline since July. So despite the rebound, we can't be so optimistic about oil prices this week.
Now, coming back to Korea, we have the 20th National Assembly kicking off its inspection of government offices this week. So is there anything from there that's worth keeping our eyes on?
First of all, a rough start was widely expected after the ruling Saenuri Party vowed to boycott all parliamentary proceedings in strong protest of the opposition bloc, which unilaterally passed a motion on Saturday to dismiss Agriculture Minister Kim Jae-soo. So whether the inspection will go through without any turbulence will be the main question. In general, these inspections don't have a lot of implications for the financial market, but of course, any unexpected outcomes can increase uncertainty.
All right, thank you so much for your outlook and analysis today, and we look forward to seeing you again.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Seoul in the year 2040 is going to look a lot different than it does now, with a smaller and older population. The average household will also shrink in size, with one person or one couple households accounting for about 60% of the total population. Now, that's according to a report by the Seoul Institute based on data collected from Statistics Korea and the Seoul government. The Korean capital's population is currently about 10 million, but that figure is expected to shrink to 9 million by 2040. The think tank says the low birth rate, coupled with the rise in the number of households leaving the city due to high housing expenses, will continue to push people out of Seoul. The report estimates that the average age of people in Seoul will stand at 52 in 2040, much older than the average age of 39 in 2013. Now, banking for younger people usually means whipping out a smartphone or connecting online from a computer. Now, that helps to explain why the number of brick-and-mortar bank branches nationwide has been dropping and why those that remain are turning their eyes to older customers and their needs. Our Lee Ju-young tells us more.
Roughly a quarter of Korea's population is part of the baby boomer generation, now aged 55 years or older. And as they gradually reach retirement, managing financial assets has become one of their most pressing tasks. In fact, one of Korea's major commercial banks, Ulsan, says about 35% of their customers were aged 50 years or older as of the end of June, up 10 percentage points from 5 years ago. The situation is similar for Shinhan Bank as well, which saw more than an 11 percentage point increase. Following this trend, banks have been rolling out more services catered towards the older generation. KB Hana Bank said it has set up counters offering financial advice specifically for senior customers at roughly 90% of its branches nationwide. Shinhan Bank has enlarged the font size on its ATMs and simplified language on phone banking services. Regional Gwangju Bank, headquartered in the country's southwest, has even dedicated 2 of its branches solely to those in the older age bracket. The Financial Supervisory Service says these targeted services come with the ever-growing need for better management of retirement funds as a new source of income. It added that the government is also looking to extend exclusive services for not only seniors but also foreigners and the disabled. Lee Ju-young, Business Daily.
And that wraps it up for today, but we'll be back tomorrow at 4:10 p.m. Korea time. There's been a little time change here for Business Daily, so don't forget to tune in then. Thanks so much for watching and see you soon.